Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the recent El Paso shooting. Took place August 3rd, 2019 at 10:39 a.m. according to Wikipedia.org. And the thing about this is, first thing off, I want to send out the few that may see this that were the families of the victims, and I offer my condolences and prayers go out to the families of the victims and another heinous crime. And just shows that we have to get so much more stringent on this gun control. It's not even funny, and there really needs to be something that needs to be done. And even like when going like to movie theaters and whatever places people may go, they gotta come up with some kind of detection system. Something which will help at least diminish these guns going into the wrong hands. Now, I know this didn't take place at a movie theater, but I'm just saying that as an example. When something takes place randomly and someone goes near a store or something, it's obviously very hard to deter something like that from transpiring, but unfortunately it has. And this took place, I believe it was like at some Walmart shopping area. The chart itself, what I drew up for this at that time for that event, this is there were 3 Leo planets in the 11th house. The 11th house, of course, is about groups, clubs, organizations. It could be where I see this as where a lot of people could be congregating, where there can be large groups of people. And you have this Leo attention-seeking energy there. There was Mars in Leo. In that 11th house, there was a series of conjunctions involving Venus, the Sun, the Leo. It's almost like you have this warped values going into shining, standing out, and ending with that Mars being that last planet in that stellium, ending in something connected with gunfire, done with sadly a lot of this Leo ferocity and a lot of this flamboyant attention-seeking energy. The shooter himself has a Sun in Leo. He did this, I believe, really, I mean, a lot of people do this regardless of their astrological positions, but I think he did this really strongly connected with glory. In this chart as well, there's also you'd say a long grand Earth trine. And unfortunately, I think when you look at grand trines on a chart, I mean, a lot of times they're very beneficial, but a lot of times it could just be where the energy could be used a lot easier without much resistance. And there was a grand Earth trine, well, a long one in this chart, but it would be one of the aspects was like at 11 around 11 degree. Or which would fall out of the trine aspect, but I still call it a long grand Earth trine. You had the Uranus in Taurus like 6 degrees, and then that Moon in Virgo was like 17. So you had 11 degrees in that orb. You can consider it a long grand Earth trine, and they all fell in the houses of endings. It fell, you had Saturn in the 4th house, Uranus in the 8th, and that Moon in Virgo in the 12th house. So a lot of, I mean, Earth energy, of course, could be very premeditated, very planned and plotted, and you have that in the house of endings, so you could do the math. I believe this was probably very, very calculated, very premeditated, very planned, and with all this Leo energy, it was very attention-seeking. Also in this chart, Chiron in Aries was very close, tight conjunction to the 7th house cusp. So this open adversary, I would look at this as that shooter, of course, might have been suffering from some kind of really strong feelings of unworthiness and not feeling really like maybe up to, you know, really didn't there was something about him that which was maybe certain low self-esteem and lack of worthiness. And really, maybe that's where this was coming out, sadly, in a warped sense. He was trying to really make himself come out and maybe feel more significant, sadly, because in doing this heinous act. And again, you did have a number of people that were murdered, a number that were shot and injured strongly, and it's just terrible. It's a shame that these things, they just seem like they can't be averted no matter what you do in terms of gun control. And in this chart too, and now in his solar sunrise chart, I don't know his time of birth, but I believe he was like July 27th, 1998. He would likely have the ruler of the 9th house, which would likely be Aries, and that's the case. That would likely fall in his 12th house, Mars in Cancer. And what that tells me is, you know that this crime apparently was due to some animosity or hatred toward Mexicans. Of course, the 9th house rules foreigners in a chart, and the 12th house is incarceration. So it's not surprising that he wound up being incarcerated due to something connected with foreigners at this time. And you have this this energy being brought out. It's interesting that in this event chart too, Libra was rising at 4 degrees, so maybe it showed a very peaceful, refined type facade, so to speak, that was at this area by this Walmart where this took place. But unfortunately, apparently looks were deceiving at this time. Interestingly enough, on an odd note, my Uranus makes a close conjunction, natal Uranus makes a close conjunction to this first house cusp, and it shows that I was going to have maybe some unusual connection with this, an astrological connection, if you will, with this, with this event. It was just maybe destined to where this was going to pan out. But anyway, in the 4th house is interesting because in the 4th house in this chart, Saturn is in it. Again, that's part of that grand Earth trine. And Saturn in the 4th, of course, could indicate some kind of restriction or limitation in emotional security. Pluto is in that 4th house as well in this event chart, and that could show just the flat-out obliteration of figurative death of emotional security. Because this happened, people now are probably even more in this state of fear and trepidation and not feeling safe and secure wherever it may be they may go. And we know the reality of this. We don't even have to look at astrological transits to see this kind of energy, that we know that as time advances, it seems like it's just getting it's just less and less safe to go different places. There's no place where you're going to be impervious to any kind of violence. I don't care how low the crime rate is in that particular area or region. It's just the way it is, sadly. And if this person, the shooter, does have in his solar sunrise chart, if he does have Mars in the 12th house, of course that could be violence. Of course, something connected with guns, gunfire could lead to incarceration and the self-undoing, because the 12th house is connected with this. Sadly, at this time, you had Mars did not make many major adverse aspects in the chart, did not make any oppositions. So it's not surprising that when you look at this, in my best of my knowledge, Mars did not make any squares. It made an inconjunct to Neptune in Pisces, but that was it. And it shows where he was able to carry this out with not a lot of interference. He may have been arrested and apprehended shortly after this, but he still was able to sadly accomplish mainly what he set out to do. There's also in this chart, there's a mutable T-square involving the moon in Virgo in the 12th house, opposing Neptune in Pisces in the 6th, and that focal point of it, which of course makes the square to both those other planets I described, is Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 3rd house. So what that tells me is that over accentuation, overcompensation point, as Jupiter in the 3rd goes, that indicates to me that this was something that this was going to be connected. The end result of this was going to really be a lot of global, obviously a lot of global communication. It was going to be a lot of communication regarding foreigners at this time. And this is And of course, because this obviously apparently was connected with some hatred, animosity toward Mexicans. So it doesn't really surprise me that that Jupiter in the third falls in as that focal point in that mutable T-square configuration, again, which involves the moon in Virgo in the 12th house of Neptune in Pisces. Of course, Neptune being all this chaotic energy, you had a lot of this emotional chaos, I believe, with that moon and opposing Neptune. When you're talking about mutable energy or mutable T-square in a chart, I mean, obviously that could show a lot of worrisome energy, a lot of anxiety, a lot of really pensive, really just a lot of general, a lot of exasperation in general, and anxiety, and really something where in apprehension. And this was something which obviously caused a lot of that. I mean, obviously T-squares in astrology can be filled with a lot of tension, and this was something, of course, which was going, which obviously had probably overabundance of tension and stress. This incident, sadly, Uranus falls in the 8th house in this event chart as well, so it's not shocking. Well, I mean, I know Uranus is shocking, but it's not really shocking that this was something that there would be death, murder involved, that was going to be something of a very unusual, very, very spontaneous, shocking nature, something that just came out like a lightning bolt, just out of the blue, so to speak. And also remember that this is the 8th house is connected with criminal profiling, so having Uranus in that 8th house could indicate that this person is very there's going to be something when they do this criminal profiling, I'm sure they've done already on him, that he's going to be and analyzing him as in terms of his crime, that this is somebody that could be rather something very unusual about this person and very enigmatic. There's going to be something that's going to come up that could be really, wouldn't surprise me, would be really shocking regarding this person at the time. And given, I want to go back to that moon in the 12th house, sadly, this could indicate, of course, a lot of emotional chaos, and also where emotions can be very chaotic based on at this event, and also too that obviously the loss of the feeling of family at this time as well, I believe, because the moon can rule family and those you're close to home with. And the thing about it too is looking at this again, there were no planets in air in this event chart. Yes, Libra was rising, but that was the only air as far as any major astrological influences in the chart. That was the only major one in air. There were no planets in air, so it was really something where people really were probably having really at this time of this event really having a hard time really understand why this was happening. Is very confounding, and really just probably had a lot of difficulty articulating and really understanding this, as is true anyway with most of these heinous these mass shootings. But it was probably even more difficult to maybe really understand what was going on at this time. I mean, they did ascertain that this was, I believe, Western knowledge, they ascertained this was a hate crime. This was something connected with as far as animosity toward Mexicans, but if there was anything else connected as far as this person, it might have been a little bit harder to actually perhaps understand this, given that there were no planets in air at this time, and people might have had more of a little harder time thinking in terms of what to do when this actually went down. And probably, and I think that's how maybe that no planets in air may have manifested in this situation. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for my take on on astrology and the El Paso, Texas shooting. Stay tuned next time, where I will be continuing my monthly horoscope segments. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.